Hey, you. Why haven't you subscribed yet? Hit the subscribe button and the bell. Enjoy the video.
After further review, our weekly talk with Mike Detillier is brought to you by the one and only New Orleans original, Cesarac Rye Whiskey.
I'm Mike D and I get respect.
You blew them circuits clean off the wall.
Hour 2, off we go. Welcome aboard. Glad you're with us. AFR, presented by the Aesthetic Medicine and Anti-Aging Clinics of Louisiana. I'm Matt.
I appreciate it, bud. Have a good one.
Joe Rodriguez.
Hey, Joe, what you doing?
And the brain.
Hey, the brain got a poop.
We're here. Glad you are as well. Paul O'Neill has a few days off. A little vacay down to the beach. But we always have Mike D with us. SaintsReport.com, MikeDetillier.com, part of the Saints News Network, and with us every single Thursday. Mike D, thanks for the time as always. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Matt.
Mike, opt-out time for the NFL. That expired 1 hour and 2 minutes ago. Final thought on the opt-out list? Any big surprises there for you?
I thought it would be more.
What do you attribute to it not being as many as you thought it would be?
I just think many of the players that cast a doubt about how this would be done, I think we're satisfied with the testing. And one of the things you got to run through your mind, too, and I've been involved with this in other businesses other than sports. There are people that, let's say they're in their late 50s into their 60s, tremendously talented in what they do, very gifted. Their mind is sharp as a tack. And they're okay, but then something happens to a family member. Okay, it might be a wife, it might be one of their children or grandchildren, and they could still work, and financially they have the money to fall back on. And their decision is, you know what, I'm going to take a break from this. I'm going to walk away for a while. And so if you're an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor, and you can do that. As a football player, I think you got to feel pretty safe that they're testing you. As many times you're safer in that bubble than you are out in the real world. You really are. Now, again, there are some things out of your control because I've talked to doctors that deal with this on a daily basis, and just the most bizarre sort of symptoms of. Some people come in asymptomatic, have no, they may be feeling a little bit down, but, all of a sudden they test positive for it. You have some people that lose their taste, smell. You have some people, the fever is unbelievable. I have a friend of mine on the bayou, 8 days. He had fever over 101 before it finally broke. And when it broke, he stayed a couple more days in the hospital. They sent him back, and he's doing well. I've had 4 people, either family-wise, close friends, pass away from it. I've had people that I know very well. They don't know anyone that's either had it or passed away from it. So bad, you got the spectrum here all over the board. And I think if you're a player, once you saw kind of how the testing was going to be done, your thing is, okay, I know my career is going to be short, and I'm not going to have this opportunity. And I feel safe in it, and maybe safer than I would feel in the real world, because if that's the case, if you're opting out, then you can't be clubbing at night, okay? You can't be going out and whoop-de-doo, okay? If you're afraid that you're going to get it, then that's some bit of self-control on your part that you have to take. And I think for a lot of players that maybe seriously considered it, they felt safe in this bubble. The other part, too, is, and what we don't know and what you may find out much later in life, is there are people in this league with some serious health issues that can still play football, but they have an issue somewhere down the road or something they've dealt with and feel safer not playing. Now, again, we see that in the real world. Matt, you've got people, and you're younger than me, that all of a sudden they get really sick, and you say, man, how can that be? They have serious heart issues, and that sort of thing. It happened to a friend of both of ours, in Jen Hale.
Mm-hmm.
I knew very early in the process because she had told me and said, just kind of keep it under wraps. A serious heart issue that she's been able to battle, and she's come back from extremely well. But you wouldn't think someone that age would have that sort of problem. And so you don't know what the next person has. So to answer your question, I think a lot of it has to do with, I think players felt comfortable in this kind of bubble that the NFL was going to put in, that they were going to get tested. You're going to have positive tests, just like what happened with the Saints today of 2 people.
Right.
Now, we'll find out a little bit more about it. Were they exposed to somebody who had it and this is precautionary? Did they test positive for it? We'll find that later. We've also seen there have been some false positive tests. And so, we'll find out a little bit more of that information, but it goes to show you that I think people that were talking about numbers in the hundreds, that wasn't accurate. Now, I thought it would be more than what it was, but I didn't think it would be hundreds. And, those are the same people that are saying about the college players. You're going to see a ton of them. And, yeah, they've had a few. And Gregory Rousseau, who you and I talked about today, name me the top pass rusher in college football. And he was the guy that I always said, that's the top pass rusher in college football, despite the fact he's just a football puppy. He's only played 1 year of college football. He was redshirted as a freshman. And he was a wide receiver safety in high school. He made that business decision. Michael Parsons. And I think both of them today, and in fact, I have a top 32, but let's just say the Saints News Network decides, don't print it. Don't print it, Mike. You can't keep it for a little while longer. Okay, all 4 guys, Bateman, Caleb Farley, along with Micah and Gregory Rousseau, would all be in the top 32. And 2 of them, Parsons and Russo, who today opted out, would be in the top 10. So it does go to show, I think some of those guys will opt out. But I throw this back to what we've talked about for weeks. No one at this time a year ago thought Joe Burrow would be the top pick in the 2020 draft. No one. And if you said it, dude, you better not take the lie detector test. Clyde Edwards-Helaire would be the only running back picked in round 1. Think about Patrick Queen, started 4 games at LSU, becomes a first-round pick. Now, Justin Jefferson, at this time a year ago, I had ranked as a second-round pick, and he goes in round 1. That's not a huge leap, but still it was a jump.
Sure.
He made that leap because of what he did a year ago. You think about Caleb, he was the only guy that we talked about as a first-round pick that actually ended up being a first-round pick in the bunch. So there's a lot of opportunity, and I think for some college players, their deal is, I'm going to play. And we've already heard from, Jamar's dad that, his plans are to play. And they will have more opt-outs in college football. That I have no doubt, and I'm ready for what's going to happen out west, because I think if there's going to be a run on it, that's where it's going to be. It's going to be out west. And so we'll see how that happens down the road. But it's not going to be, hundreds and hundreds of players like you see this today. It's the same thing like Connecticut dropping football. And, I mean, you'd have swore, you were battening down for a Category 5 hurricane because Connecticut opted out of football this year. If you know the backstory of it, most of those games they had scheduled, they had already been dropped,
right? Because
it was out of their conference deal. Because now they're an independent. So again, it's not as many as I thought. Certainly, when you look at the Patriots and that many players, that has an effect on your football team. I don't care how you cut it. It has a negative effect. To C.J. Mosley not being there with the Jets, he's a big money free agent guy. That's a huge hole. And Nate Soldier, a guy, you got a young quarterback you're trying to protect, and Soldier was going to be one of the guys that was going to do it. That's major when you lose that. But, listen, I respect the guys that have opted to play, and I respect some of it, because I don't know their medical condition, and neither does anybody else listening to this. You don't know it. You don't know what you don't know about someone's medical condition or what they're dealing with. And I've had to deal with this outside the sports world, similar situations with people having to deal with it. So, it's going to be interesting because I did a podcast that is not out yet. And I did it with a former coach. The first thing he says is about, what would concern me is depth. And he said, what would concern me? My deep snapper tests positive for COVID on a Friday, and he can't play, and I got to have some backup guy snap the ball to my holder, and the timing of the hold, the kick, everything else. And he said, you got people on the street, anybody can do that. Okay, well, then why didn't you do it? Oh, well, I had a bad knee. Well, you can't snap the ball? Well, I blew out my neck. No, that's an art form of being a deep snapper. In this league or any other league. That is a real art form to do. Let him miss a kick because of a bad snap, and you find out. Look how long Trey Junkin played in this league. Trey's a Tech guy, Louisiana Tech guy, knew him well. He played 18, 19 years in the NFL. What do people remember him for? The bad snap when the 49ers played the Giants in a game which messed up a kick. And that's what you remember him for. Not for all the other snaps he hit right on target, but for that one. Kinchin can tell you the story about cutting his finger, the night before the Super Bowl. And he's got to make the snap, for Vinatieri's kick. Of how that turned out okay, but it could have been the other way. I'm just telling you, it's the options now that guys like Peyton and all the other coaches got to run through your head now. Man, if I lose my deep snapper, what about my holder? Or what about my kicker? That's something you might have thought a little bit about. So now on your developmental squad, do you keep a deep snapper? Do you keep another kicker? It's something that hadn't maybe run through your mind. Now you might have to run it through your head. Yeah.
Mike Detillier is with us. Mike, let me knock out a quick break. We already know that the Saints have already started chopping that roster. I want to get your reaction to that and what we've learned so far through the early days of what Sean Payton is saying is not training camp.
Well, look, we're in the early portion of training camp, and I mean, we're in walkthroughs and meetings. It's not until next week that we really get into, really more of a practice setting.
Sean Payton talking with the media as Saints are beginning early portions of training camp. Visiting with Mike Detillier. Chat's brought to you by Sazerac Rye, the one and only New Orleans original. Sazerac Rye. Pick it up wherever you buy your spirits. Hey, Mike D, we also saw today, it was Saints Media Day, so we got to see pictures of a lot of the Saints, including a trimmed-down Jameis Winston. What did you think about seeing Jameis? It's got to be down, Mike, 20, 30 pounds? I mean, he's svelte.
He looks like he's down 15 or more.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. Jameis is always, if you've been around him, and he came twice to the Manning camp, so got a chance to be around him. He's a big man.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not a small quarterback. He is a big man. And I just think he felt it was best for him. And we see that from different players during their career. They get a little thinner. They get a little bigger. It's whatever they feel is best for them at that time. But he certainly looks thinner, which should help his mobility skills. I think that's one thing as you get up in weight, it sort of takes it away a little bit when you start to put on those type pounds. So I think as a quarterback, you try to keep your weight at a certain thing. I know I got a connection sort of like 6 degrees of separation. But one of the things Tom Brady says all the time to people is, my weight's the same as his. Because I feel comfortable at that weight. Mm-hmm. Now, he might look different. He looks younger today than he did when he was in his 20s. But when you look at him, he's built the same way. He's kept his weight at a certain level. And I think for a lot of times as guys get older in their career, they want to jump weight off. And I've had people tell me that's not a really good idea unless you're heavy. Mm-hmm. You should sort of keep that weight on you. So it's interesting to see with Jameis, and we won't get a chance, other than in the practice sessions, to watch him throw the football. He is an immensely gifted guy as a passer. Man, he got some talent, and he got some arm talent that is out of this world. Again, the decision-making process is the part that I'd want to see. Listen, it's great that he loses weight, but how does that help him when he's out on the field to make a throw? Because I think that's the negative with Jameis. Not that he can't make the deep throw downfield. Not that at times he looks great and at other times you say, what was he thinking making that throw? There is a process with him that I think you can get a little bit better. You're never going to stop him from making a throw that you shake your head about. That is part of him. And my old friend Gabe Coverhouse, who just passed away a few weeks back, she compared him to Vinny Testaverde. And she was like, I was here when we picked Vinny. And, and I see Jameis. And there are some similarities with the two. Big, tall guys sit in a pocket and can arm throw and make every throw in the book. And then there are times you just shake your head about, what are you doing? And she said it was the best thing. We got rid of Vinny, and he started for 6 other teams in the NFL. I think he played until he was 44 years old. So it does go to show you, I think you can better that part, but how much better? Jameis is always going to be a guy that's going to take a chance with a throw only because he's done it all his life. Matt, it's hard to break that habit. It's really, really hard. Now, people say, well, look at Peyton Manning, look at Drew Brees. Well, you know what? They didn't have that rifle. So they learned a different way of how to get the ball in tight quarters. Jameis can arm talent it down there. That's hard to break. When you think you can make a throw because you might practice it a certain way, put them in a game situation and see what happens. I think you go back to what you've normally done. You can get a little bit better, but it's like trying to teach calculus to a C- student. You ain't getting him to an A.
Hey, man, I made an A in calculus in college, Mike. I made an A in calculus in college.
Well, Matt, I would have guessed the under.
I busted my ass for that A, Mike.
Listen, I get it. I get it. But listen, if you not, because there are some people that know certain things and yet maybe math or in English they're not quite as good at, and they struggle with it. And so you can get them a little bit better, but you're never going to get them to an A student. If you're a C- D student, you're never going to be that A student. Now, if you get some to a B, man, you've done great work. Put it to you that way.
Mike, let's talk about some of the cuts. It surprised, I think, a lot of people. Certainly surprised me that they were so proactive in getting that number down to 80. And there were some big names. Taylor Stallworth, Tommy Lee Lewis. What was your reaction seeing some of those cuts?
Oh, Tommy Lee wasn't a shock to me once it was an 80 cut. Taylor, I understood, and in fact, I posted it as soon as I heard it. It popped to me. You got an 80-man roster. You look at the defensive tackles, and I think Taylor's a solid player, and he can play in the NFL somewhere. Now, if you're the Saints, you know what Taylor Stallworth can do good and what he can't. You look at that defensive tackle position for the Saints with Sheldon Rankins, David Onyemata, Malcolm Brown. And you got 2 guys that are hybrid players in Marcus Hunt and also Mario Edwards. So that brings you to 5. Shy Tuttle. Okay, that gets you to 6. And then you want to give Malcolm Roach an opportunity. I think that a lot of times when you make these decisions and it comes down to, do I bring Taylor to camp or do I give Malcolm a shot? It was, let's give Malcolm a shot in these preparation type situations and see how well he performs. If he doesn't perform well and Taylor's still out there, we can go out there and get him, because everybody's sort of trying to get it, to 80, and it's going to be tough. But that means you got 7 guys that can play defensive tackle on an 80-man roster. Matt, that's because you can see where the numbers are catching up with you. Where I think this team still needs to add is at corner and an outside corner. And again, there are a few guys out there that haven't signed yet, and that all comes down to contracts with Logan Ryan or Drake Kirkpatrick. Financially, can you make it fit here? you see with the situation with Clowney, and he's frustrated a lot of people in this league. Put it to you that way. Some people thought they had him at one time, and then he walks away and wants a little bit more, and you just wonder kind of what's happening with him. The Browns made a great offer, Titans made a great offer, Seahawks have made a great offer, and on a 1-year deal, and he's walked. And so, again, he wants to get paid like an elite defensive end. I think he's a very good one. I don't think he's an elite one, but I think he's a very good one. And he could help any team in the NFL. But, man, when he's talking about he turned down $18 million and $17 from Seattle.
Wow.
I mean, who's going to come up with that type of dough today? That's a lot of money when you're throwing at him, even if it's a 1-year deal. Everson Griffin now is also a guy I think a lot of teams are looking at. Everson, I think, is a little bit like Eric Martin, to be honest with you. Eric was a guy, he was like, man, I don't want to go to training camp. Man, let them other guys play. And, I'll come in like after week 3 of preseason, and, I get like a week and a half in, and I'm good.
Brett Favre did the same thing. Brett Favre did the same thing.
Eric signed more 1-year contracts than anybody I know in the history of the National Football League. Eric was, no, I'm not going in, go through all that training camp. Man, let me come in, week 3. I'll never forget Joe Johnson. He was a late holdout one year, and he comes in to Tuesday before a Sunday game against the Rams. In that game, I think he had 4 tackles, 3 tackles, 4 losses, and 2 quarterback sacks. Come on. I mean, he didn't need all that. Now, for some people, they need it because they're not guaranteed a spot on the team. But there are players, they don't need all this weeks of training camp. And, what can Everson Griffin learn in a training camp today that he hasn't been through? Nothing, really. I mean, he's been through everything as long as he's played in this league. So it's interesting how it all goes. But I think with Taylor, it basically came down to numbers. And the same thing basically with Tommy Lee Lewis. He's a favorite of Sean Payton's. I don't think there's any question about it. N'Keal was the biggest surprise to me at corner because there was a guy that had spent some time in Arizona and then goes to the XFL. Interesting, June Jones does a Monday show with us, and he bragged long before the XFL kicked off, man, I got a cornerback here that's really good, and he can play in the NFL. And all of a sudden, he does a really good job. He didn't get his opportunity, just didn't. So, that really helps a young, undrafted free agent rookie by the name of Keith Washington, who's got some skills, a former quarterback in high school, went to Michigan, didn't work out there. Then he goes to West Virginia. They're going to give Keith Washington a long look, and he can play the outside corner. That's what they need because PJ and Patrick Robinson are really inside players. They're really nickel corners, and PJ can play the nickel safety too. But one thing I can tell you is from talking to a couple of the Saints coaches, man, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is a guy they think is going to play huge this year. They have talked him up big time about what type of impact he can play. And we saw last year his impact as a rookie on this football team. But, man, they are really high on him. So I think if there's a move to be made, it's certainly at the cornerback position to bring in a veteran because of the fact of depth, injury-wise, and who knows of what happens as the season goes along, with the COVID situation.
Mike, I also want to ask you about Nigel Bradham, which we'll get to. Also, we got a lot of LSU stuff I want to get to as well. Let me knock out a quick break. We'll come back, and your questions for Mike D in about 15 minutes. Glad you're hanging out with us. Mike D's here, brought to you by Sazerac Rye. We'll take a break. We'll return on Mike D's with us. Glad to have you hanging out. Mike, I want to get to some LSU stuff in a second, but one more on the Saints. Since we last spoke, the Saints added veteran free agent linebacker Nigel Bradham. Thoughts on the addition and what he might mean for this defense?
About a lot of people, he's just depth. No, he's brought in to be the starter. I'm just telling you. I know one thing in Nigel's mind, he's going to be the starter on the strong side on this football team. He's a big, physical linebacker, puts himself in a good position to make plays against the run. He's solid in the coverage part of the game. He still runs really well, east-west. And I think if everybody's healthy, that's the big if. He would start on the strong side, DeMario on the weak side, Alex Anzalone in the middle. I think that's what you would look at as the starters. And all I'm telling you, man, he is a very competitive guy, a real sharp football player. And listen, when you play for Jim Schwartz, and Jim is a guy that is a master tinkerer. I mean, every game he tinkers around with the defense, and he does a really good job of it. No, you got to be sharp to play that. And he's played in a lot of big games in Philly. So I think that, yes, he was added to add depth. They didn't give that to Nigel on the memo. No, he thinks he's brought in. He's going to be the starter. No, I'm just telling you. And I think if healthy, Davis, Bradham, Anzalone would be your three starters. Now, the Saints play about 70% or maybe a little bit more of nickel. So one of those guys are out of there. But still, to get him this late, it came down to finances. Could you come up with the right deal? But I think that's a real solid pickup for this football team late in the process.
Mike Detillier is with us on Twitter at Mike Detillier. Mike, I've been really want to talk about this with you in particular. Ed Ogeron mentioned earlier in the week, really gushed about Chris Curry. I'm switching, obviously, from Saints to LSU. He gushed about Chris Curry. Mike, what have we learned about Curry now that we didn't know last year before the Oklahoma game? That's had him now to where he seems to have leapfrogged the other two guys that he was behind last year.
I think one of the things is I think Ed respected the fact he didn't leave. The fact that John Emery and Tyron coming in here, that it would have been an easy, hey, tag me, I'm out. I'm going to play somewhere. And he waited his turn, and he got better. And physically, man, you stand up next to him, man, he is pieced together. I mean, like he's chiseled out of stone. And we always knew he was a good inside runner. And now he's worked really hard on being that blitz pickup guy, that guy that can catch the football coming out of the backfield a little bit cleaner than maybe he did in the past. But I think Ed loves his toughness, not only as a player, but mentally. Because a lot of running backs who have had that type of success, if you're in junior high school and high school, and then you got to sit, come on, man, I want to play. But basically him telling Coach O, hey, when you're going to give me a chance, I'm going to show you how good I am. And he sure did. And now you see it. And I agree with Ed that he's one of those type of guys. The more you challenge him, the better he becomes. But, Matt, I'm going to throw something out at you. Other than Eric Gilbert, tell me the other freshman on offense that every time Ed has opened his mouth, he's talked about.
Kayshon Boutte?
Nope. Covontre Bradford at running back. Listen to those tapes when he does those shows on Tuesday. Every time, if he's been on this channel or on other channels, when he brings up offensive players, Bradford's name comes out of his mouth. He's trying to tell you something. Again, he's not writing your story, but he's telling you something about Bradford. And it's early in the process, but he's telling you something there about Bradford. But listen to that every time they ask him about an offensive player, the freshman, Bradford's name comes out of his mouth. Now, Gilbert's first on that list, but Bradford and Boutte are 2 and 3. But Bradford's out of his mouth very quickly. He is trying to tell you something, okay? That this kid is really good, that I'm telling you how good he is. And he's saying it over and over and over again about Bradford as a running back. And he wasn't one of these guys that was, I think he's probably was a top 20 back, 25 back or whatever, but I don't even think he was one of the top dozen players in the state of Texas. I think he was like 18, 19, somewhere in that range. And now, every time that question gets asked about, man, who's impressed you on offense? I know, it's not in pads and all, but who's impressed you? And, he'll bring up Gilbert, brings up Bradford. Interesting.
How does a fourth running back factor in, though, Mike? That's hard for me to. I'm with you. That's hard for me to reconcile how that works out.
I don't know how it works out. I'm just telling you, he is trying to explain something without driving it home, that he is continually bringing up Bradford's name. Every time he opens his mouth about freshman players on offense, just like he's done about Jaquelin Roy or Guillory or Josh White on defense or Elias Ricks. He's brought up those four names, and the two pass rushers, BJ, he's brought up over and over again. Yeah. On offense, the two guys he's mentioned more than anybody else has been Gilbert and Bradford. How that fits in, I have no idea. But I'm just telling you, he is trying to explain to you something that he sees in Bradford that he really likes. Either that or he wouldn't say it. I mean, you kind of got to pry him a little bit for information, but he'll give it to you if you ask him the right questions. And he has said it over and over again about Coventry.
I'm not calling you a liar, Mike. I'm just curious how it's all going to work out. That's all.
No, you can't call me a liar because it's on tape. No, he has said it.
All right, Mike's with us. He's on Twitter at Mike Detillier. Mike, one more thought on LSU before we break and we get to listener questions. Obviously, it's going to be unorthodox, right, how they're going to handle things with the delayed start now. What do you expect from Coach O and from this sort of, Mike, I don't know what to call it, a modified fall camp, which they're not really going to have fall camp between now and the start of the season in September?
I think the easy part is the pitch and catch part of the game. I think that comes quickly. The hardest part is going to be on defense because you can't really simulate a game. You can a little bit in a practice, but the angles to get to a ball carrier or to make a tackle, that's the hardest thing to get back on defense. And now, I mean, today, you can see why most of these guys don't want to play defense. They want to play on offense. Man, you had a disadvantage. But I think the physicality part of the defensive line, but mostly on defense, that ability to get the right angle to make a tackle and the pull down and the tackle properly today, I think that's the hardest thing. The mental part of a new scheme, you would make, all I know is they made mistakes last year with a defense they knew. Mm-hmm. So you're going to make mistakes this year with a new defense, but I think it's the physical part of it. That's where I do think the pitch and catch part of the game, the teams that can really do that well and jump on you like a bad cat, man, you got trouble early in the season. And if you fall behind 20-0 or 20-6 in a game, you're in trouble because, again, that ability to score and score quickly in the pitch and catch part of the game and to find the mismatches downfield are going to be there and wide open early in the season. The hard part is getting down the physical part, and mostly on defense. Now, for years, you'd hear the story, defenses have the advantage early in the season. That ain't the case, not anymore. I mean, I can practice pitching and catching with receivers and tight ends all I want. I can do that individually. Hey, let's go throw the football, and that sort of thing. I do think the defense is now, again, put in a bad situation. But that's for every team in college football. And the physical part of getting into the right spot and making the tackle properly. And now today, your zone to hit a guy is so limited. You can't hit him low. You can't hit him high. Your strike zone is pretty tight into that. I think that's going to be the hardest part of getting everything down because I think the other stuff will come very quickly.
Mike D's with us. Mike, we'll knock out our final break, come back and wrap up hour number 2. If you got a question for Mike, get it in. You know how. Email me, matt@1045ESPN.com. Tweet me at Matt Moscona at 1045ESPN. You can jump in the Bayou Ford Huddle or in our YouTube chat on the Watch 1045 ESPN YouTube channel. Your questions for Mike next. All right, wrapping up our hour with Mike Detillier. You know the drill. Your questions for Mike, get them in. You can tweet me at Matt Moscona at 1045 ESPN. You can jump in the huddle or on the YouTube chat on the 1045 ESPN YouTube channel. Get your questions in right there. All right, Mike D, we'll get to it. This was an interesting one via email from Warren. It said, Mike D, do you think Drew Brees can really improve and try to throw more deep balls?
That ain't his mantra. Come on, that's not his wheelhouse. Never has been. Even when he was 21, 22 years old. Now, again, I get what you're doing in the offseason. Okay, I understand it. That's not what Drew does best. You know, he's a short, intermediate passer. Now, does it help his medium game? Now, that's the big part of it. Man, how many deep passes do you hit in a game? You know, I know Slinger used to say this. Steve Ensminger would always say, man, Mike, you got 4 or 5 opportunities in a game to throw a deep ball. And you got to hit on most of them. Like he says, you won't hit on all of them, but how many times do you see a guy wide open and he didn't come up with the catch? No, it's the medium part of the game was what I'm interested in. Man, I ain't worried about, come on, Drew Brees ain't whipping the ball 70 yards downfield. That's not his game, never was. What I'm interested in, does he have more oomph on that 15, 20-yard route where I think that's fallen a little bit, you know, throughout the years. Man, he's great in that short part of the game. But the Saints don't call a lot of deep passes, and when they call it, normally the guy's wide open, you know? And in the playoff game, who threw the deep ball?
Taysom
Hill.
And,
So,
and he underthrew it.
And he underthrew it, is right. So here's my deal, and that's a great storyline. Man, I could give a damn less about the deep ball. My thing is, can you improve that, maybe what you want to call the deep middle passes? Because I think that's an important part of the game that gets defenses to come off the short part of coverage, more so than the real deep football, which he's never been known for that.
Ask Mike, could you see Benny Fowler making the Saints as a 5th wide receiver or be the stretch the field guy?
No, I think if Fowler makes this team, it's because of special teams. You know, because he's done that. He did that in Denver. He was like that with the Giants. It's going to be a tough role for him to make this football team. But if he makes it, it won't be because of his stretch speed. It'll be because he is a really good special teams player.
Mike, here's another one asking percent chances of Clowney or Griffin signing with the Saints. Mike, I'm sure you can understand there's just a huge fan infatuation with those two guys and where they're going to land. But go ahead.
I would not rule it out. But, man, the kind of money Clowney's looking for, I can't see. And, you know, and I think that they had some conversations with both. But I think financially, how do you fit it in? And it's a want at this state, and look what you gave up for Davenport. Yeah. You know, this is his season, and he's got to stay healthy. That it's not because of his play; it's the health part of it. And I think to bring in somebody like that, you're going to have to say, okay, you're going to be the starter. Okay, you're not bringing in Clowney and Griffin to sit on the bench. You know, I think the big key defensively up front is the development of Carl Granderson at defensive end, who's a tall drink of water. Man, he ain't got much on the hoof. But, man, you know, he didn't see any time in the summer. You know, he had some issues he had to clear up. And he comes in, and all of a sudden he's on the field as a designated pass rusher with no training camp, nothing. He's a guy that I would be intrigued with. I think along with Deontay Harris on offense, how much more they use him as a receiver. Those two guys for me are the most interesting to watch because of their ability and also, too, to flip it. Harris can flip the field right away. And the fact that Granderson missed all that time and he's coming in and he's your designated pass rusher at times, that's impressive.
Last one, ask Mike, do you see Kiko Alonso making the roster?
If he's healthy, yes.
Okay.
Because he's a multi-position player. He's smart. You know what you're going to get from Kiko. But, man, the big question mark is health. It's the same as Anzalone. They're both good players. It's just, can they stay healthy for a 16-game season and plus?
Yeah.
Man, I want everybody healthy come January. That I think is the big key for the Saints' success this year of health. And I think that'll be like that for every team, and more so this year than any other year.
He is Mike Detillier. Our chat's brought to you every week, courtesy of our friends over at Sazerac Rye, the one and only New Orleans original Sazerac Rye whiskey. You can find Mike's stuff, saintsreport.com, MikeDetillier.com, part of the Saints News Network over at SI.com, and every Thursday right here on AFR. Mike D, you're the man. We appreciate you as always.
Thank you, Matthew.
We'll talk next week. This is After Further Review. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.